Hello everybody, my name's Ian Ellis. This is Great Artist Steel. What we're looking at today is the palette and colour mixing of Lucian Freud. It's also a bit of an introduction to the Old Master palette, which we'll look at a bit more in detail with when we look at Anders Zorn's paintings. But Freud's paintings is quite similar. The Old Master palette I came across it in the European art in Titian's paintings. He would just use yellow ochre, red ochre, black and white. Now red ochre is slightly different to the burnt sienna that you see in Freud's paintings. You've got and here is added a yellow to it. It's a cadmium yellow, so I've got yellow ochre, say the same thing. The burnt sienna is more of an orange than the red ochre. So what in its place to help it shift, you've got the red here, vermilion, and then you've got the black and white. Now, looking at the colours Freud's used, you can see that there's kind of ochre colours here, but some of these ochres will need a bit of yellow with them, so the yellow's there to shift it slightly. The reason why this works is interesting. So if you look at, works for skin colour, that is what I mean. When you look at the palette and ignoring the yellow ochre, ignoring the cadmium yellow, and just look at the yellow ochre itself and start adding black with it, you see a kind of greenish hue to the actual ochre, and you put that next to something that's more red, you get it will see it appear greenish. Let's just look at the red, add black to the red, and keep adding black. And a bit of white with it, it starts going a bit purplish. More black. And I'm just looking at how the colours start looking like, it looks like a cool red now. A cool red are going towards a purple. So you've got the idea of a warm red, a cool red, a green, and an orange, and the orange being more. They're making this look much more green. That's a burnt sienna, and you get a full range of colours. Now, what's missing is a blue. So to get the blue, the idea of a blue is just using. Excuse me, clean my knife. Again, it's just a grey, but when you put the colour next to all these warm colours, optically it will appear cooler. You've got a kind of so this has got you've got the blue, you've got the full spectrum there. You've got the idea of yellow, green, blue, orange, purple, red. And that's the beauty of the palette, and that's why a lot of portrait painters use it, because it's easy to get the subtleties of the skin. A lot of the skin colours we find goes towards a greenish colour, but you find Freud doesn't use this too often. He doesn't like the greens in his painting. You don't see it too often. You find quite a lot of cool grey. So if you look at a Lucian Freud painting, you'll find it's more warm and cool with the oranges. He likes his burnt siennas, and he likes his ochre, and then he'll set it off greys. So it might get the red. The colour here is a very subtle grey red. Then you've got a neutral grey coming in here with the slightly, maybe a little bit of colour with it, but quite a lot of these colours are just black and white. And if you look at a painting, the thing that really sets them off are the greys against the warm. So you get the grey colours and the warm colours against each other. And you'll find, if you look at someone's face, you won't find so many cool colours in the painting, but he puts them in. And if you look at all his paintings, it's the greys that go in with the warm colours that get the colours to look, powerful. It's a kind of glow you get looking at the paintings. It gets away with the black, like a lot of old masters would get away with it by glazing, but with him, he gets away with it just by pointing the paint really quite thick. He doesn't dilute the paint. So if the old masters, what they would do, they would actually put all the blacks and the greys underneath the painting and the opaque colours underneath it and then glaze over. With him, it'd be mixing just thicker paint. So what happens if you liquid the paint, the colours will look dirty, so because the black pigment shown. Anyway, I'll just do a bit of painting for you, a bit of mixing. I'll just try and show you how I'd get these ochre colours here. I mean, just using a tint of a bit of grey on my knife, and I've just got the grey and ochre in there, and I've actually gone too grey. Keep my knife clean. And just get that colour down to the lightness I want, and you can see it's looking too intense, so tiny bits of, I've got bits of grey over here, will calm down the ochre, and it kind of looks okay, some of those colours in there, and I can just stop a little bit of yellow, just to, not much, it's hardly any yellow used, just to set it off, just to give it, there's a painter called Giorgio Morandi. He'd use a marge yellow instead of a yellow ochre, and the marge yellow has slightly more yellow in it. I mean, it could have used the marge yellow for that, but you see that beauty of the colour just really goes in and get some, and it'll mix that up with more greys coming into the painting. So you find other greys broken in a bit more with the ochre, with the grey around the side of the face, just around the side of the lips here. A lot of this grey colour, when you look at someone's face, it's kind of reflected light coming back at you. So is looking directly at someone's face is really well known for somebody who really scrutinises colour and scrutinises areas. So its way of working is quite interesting. It worked a bit like the Leonardo would work. It'd start off with a very tiny detail and work outwards. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do a little bit of painting. First of all, to get these colours mixed. All painters, when they're painting, if you know what you're doing, it's preparing the palette first. It's just, if you do that, what happens, the intuition starts clicking in, because a little bit of this, a little bit of that happens, but you find when you've got your colours on the palette, I've said this before, you know, it's so important to compare colours on the palette so you can actually slightly alter things very quickly. If you go one colour at a time, you can't do that. You can't just move it around. So I'm going to go for the burnt sienna now, just for this colour here. It looked quite pink on there, but it might be, in fact, there's so much yellow in there, it might make it look a little bit pinkish. But I can see I'm going lighter, and that looks a bit too strong, so I'm just going to grey it slightly, a bit more sienna with that, and make it more grey. That looks okay. A little bit of red, I think, just to come into it, just a tiny bit. And some of the colours play as sienna, and I'm just using the red just to grey. Remember, I've got grey in that, so I've greyed it and put white in it. White cools it down as well. And I'm just looking at those colours, comparing them. That's okay on that side. A little bit more pink over this side. The lips are quite similar in the colours there. Some greys around the eyes. The eyes being a kind of more of a neutral grey. Quite a lot of portrait painters, when they paint the eyes, they tend to, when they first start, beginners, they tend to put the eyes too light. Remember, the light source comes from above, and you can see the light source is very strong on the forehead here, and just catches the eyelids, and the eyelids will be lighter than the whites of the eyes, because the white's actually in the shade, so you're getting a grey, and the eyelid there really quite just a little bit of colour. So what I did with this, I could see underneath, it's quite unusual painting actually for this one, because it looks like he's put a warm ground down, and quite a lot of times he's painting on a white surface, and the warm ground I actually put down with acrylic. I drew this, I traced it actually with a bit of felt tip pen, and I can see the felt tips now coming through. I went over it with a white acrylic, and then just when I let that dry, and then put another a wash of white of burnt sienna acrylic over the top, just to give me a ground. Now I might have created this colour by just the layering. Is notorious for the amount of time it's spent on a painting. It's hard to believe how many sittings the person would have to do. Sometimes it's something like many 70 sittings, and it looks spontaneous, but I think a lot of the energy comes in right at the end of the painting. I'm just going to do a bit of painting now. Building up the colours. I've got some round brushes here, or filbert brushes. The filbert brushes are slightly arched. I've got a couple of flat brushes I don't think I'll use. I'll stick with quite a large brush for this side of painting, and I'm going to start looking at the skin colours on the cheek. And a little bit more liquid with the paint, because the paint's just flowing a little bit. Just a bit more, just moving it slightly. Just a little bit too much liquid on that. Now it looks a bit dark at that at the moment. I'm just going to bring in the darker colours quite quickly. The dark grey, using a different brush. Looks like there's a slightly bit of red in the grey. So I remember that was just the red with the grey, and around the face this side, and I'm sketching it quite quickly. Over the other side it looks a bit warmer. A warmer being in a slightly more of an orange grey, and I'm just putting down more grey. Shouldn't be using my brush just to save time, and I'm looking at that, darting a bit more white with it, and gone a bit heavy there. When you're painting, gone a bit heavy, just take it away. It's a nice thing with the acrylic underneath there, it just takes it off. Try and avoid that if you can. You're trying to get it right first time. You can see there's brush marks and what's happening, the colour underneath is just coming through slightly, and I've just taken it away too much there. I'm going to go for the dark colour as well, the dark grey blacks at the back there. I think there's slightly a bit of red with them, so I'm going to put those in quite quickly so I can see how dark I need to make the rest of the colours. Just a little bit too strong. More red. Around the back here as well. Some of these colours look a bit more kind of grey ochres or something between the two, so I'm just going to put a bit of white with that, not much, and I'm just using the ochre to get these darker greys up here. A bit more white. Just look a bit more red when I'm just bringing those reds into that painting. And then going for more of a black as it drops down. And around the back here. Now, I'm just going to start working on a bit of detail now. I'm going to go for the eye. Just working with that. And I'm not going to move on. I'm going to stay with the colour before, and I'll just stay with the painting. And I've just got the neutral grey for the eye there. And then there's a bit more of a light grey, pure white grey at the back. So I'm just using the white with the black straight away, a little bit more for this side of the eye. And then it looks more of an ochre. I've got this colour already mixed over here on the eyelid. A little bit more underneath that, then back towards the Sienna, if you like, just a little bit more grey, just to grey it slightly, just a little bit more red as well, just in there, just to set it off. That's better. Then a bit more red on top of the eyelid there. Back to the ochres on the eyes here, these light ochres with a grey added to them. And over the other side as well. I find it quite difficult, as you might see, to work this way, because my natural way of working is to actually work the overall thing, and I'm trying to get my head around the way Freud works. So what he's doing is working with a detail, and you can see I keep putting the paint around the painting, which is fine. I'll get there, but if you want to learn how to do it with Freud, you've not got to do this. You've got to actually really. I'm going to try and focus now on the eye and not move away. I mean, it's like sometimes when I was at art school, a tutor would come up to me and put a bit of tape around and said, right, focus on that, and it gets you doing. Because some of you will find you're more like me, and it's really hard to get your head around to work a different way. So it's one of those things that. I mean, I'm not naturally a painter like Freud and something, but I still find it interesting. But now I've got a bit more of a grey around the back. That's looking a bit darker in there. There's a little bit darker than that. And then there's some more ochres with the dark ochres I've got here for this part of the eyebrow there. I'm using quite a dry brush there, but a bit more of a grey ochre, but more white with the ochre here. And a grey itself, actually running around for the actual nose. It puts a light grey on top of that colour. And I'm just going to bring a bit more of a darker sienna in that. Underneath the nose there. Looks like it's just it has got some thinner paint underneath there. So. And then it's got the lighter ochre. Grey ochre like over the top. And the lips. Try and keep my brushes clean. Not super clean though. There is a kind of dirtiness in these paintings. It makes them more grotesque in a way. And funny, this one isn't actually. This one is actually a painting of his granddaughter. Frances Costello, and she was obviously that he was there's an attachment there. You can see that, and it's quite rare. You don't normally see that in Freud paintings. Perhaps one of the reasons why I've chosen it is that there is a kind of side to Freud that is you don't normally see, but it's there in that painting. It couldn't help it, which is it's his granddaughter, which is sweet, isn't it? And now just looking at these ochres again. Keep swapping brushes. Around here you've got some darker ochres underneath there as well. A bit more purpley pinky colours. Don't want much paint on there. I'm just going to drag it round, really sketching with the brush, with the way Freud would work, and it goes for more of a grey. You use a bit more of a grey ochre greeny colour here, but I'm not saying it's kind of halfway between the two. It's kind of mixing the two. Underneath the lip there, then you get the darker excuse me, and the ochre comes down and you get more of a sienna again, a darker sienna coming underneath the mouth there. That's really powerful little shape. And quite a lot of these colours, it's kind of almost like a semi-glaze. I mean, Cézanne was a big influence, a lot of painters, but some of these colours, you can see the underneath colours actually coming through them slightly, so he's not killing the colour totally underneath. Makes me wonder why it takes them so long sometimes, because it just looks so quick. But I suppose it's very difficult to come out with this painting and make it work like a painting. It's when you're doing a painting from somebody, it's so difficult to actually move it away from just the copying and then turn it into something that belongs to painting. That's what Freud's managed to do. Just beautifully painted. And I'm just going to bring a flatter, more colour underneath the lip then, perhaps a little bit more. Looks a little bit, mate, it's a cleaner sienna in there. That's better, just a bit too much white in it. And then you bring the darker colour on, the darker sienna. when he draws the lip with the flick of the paint. While the paint's wet. And it looks like he's got a bit of red coming through. Let's make it a bit stronger, that colour. And he's got some really light ochres on the lip, just reflecting. Keep it clean. It's very wet. It's going to be a bit dirty if not careful. Just take out a bit of paint when it goes a bit dirty. And I've got a grey ochre appearing, more of a grey, not grey ochre, just a neutral grey, just appearing here, a bit more white with it. And put it on the face and underneath the chin. That should bring the chin forward. And over this side are some grey reds, very dark grey reds on this side of the, bit more red with it. More black. Just a little bit more light white with it. Not quite red enough, that's better. And the shirt, the collar shirt over there, slightly, the shirt colour is slightly, it's more blue. I mean, well, it's more a pure grey. So I'm just going to using the grey, and you can see how blue that will look when you put that on there compared to this side, and maybe a few greys, perhaps a little bit too blue in the painting. There's also some lovely greys put in the painting. I put that in a bit later on. They do look like they've been put on top of the painting. And I'm just going to go for this area of the face now, the forehead. Back to the same colour I was using earlier with the and this colour, this is really important to get these contrast of the ochre, light ochres with the pinks, and it should bring the pinks out. Thinking those are the first colours I used. They're all starting looking a little bit less. I'm using quite a dry paint there. I need to mix more paint. Trying to use the ochre, bit of black, a little bit of yellow, just and some of these colours look like he's actually put the colour on without actually mixing the colours properly. And then I've got more white, some lovely light greys in there. Just picking the white with the grey, and there's some really beautiful, very light greys, very light, just flicking in. And then they look a little bit purple, so just a little bit pink's gone into this as it drops down. And that sets everything off nicely, a bit of pink in the grey there, and a little bit around here as well. Now just gonna do a bit more of some of these ochres. These grey ochres are a bit in between colours, so I'll put a bit more ochre with this colour. So, and over this side, and it looks like it's rubbed in. It's almost like a glaze in there, where I can actually use a paint. It looks like it's smeared it off. So I'm going to do the same. I can use a brush to do that, take it off. But I'm using a bit of rag and a bit more white with the ochre over here, and you've got these colours dropping down around the side, breaking into the hair there, and I've got again a pinky grey following the form of the head round that way, and back over this side is a bit lighter. And I'm getting the painting to got a bit more Sienna underneath the painting. Just a bit more Sienna appearing underneath that, it's lighter. And you just get the brush marks. I mean, I've gone too heavy with the brush mark there. I'm just taking that away. If I now bring back that brush mark, I'll also bring back the pink into this colour. I'm just going to put more white with it. And you get these, that's a bit more like it, a bit more pink in there. A bit more light, very much lighter sienna. Now, just working on the chin, get a cleaner brush. And just a little bit more ochre coming in here. And then there's a slightly darker colour around the chin. Bring that, but if I go back, my brush is getting a bit dirty. Trying to do this as quick as I can without taking too much of a time up, but just looking at the chin, if you draw the chin around there, you've got the movement of the slightly more of a grey ochre just around here. And just go for the eye again, go for the other eye, so it starts looking. And I get the grey again, the grey I've got the other side, a bit more green grey, a bit more ochre in there. And then the top of the eyebrow, a little bit of ochre, of the eyelid, sorry. A bit of ochre in there. Sorry, one bit. More of a red on that bit there, that's a red line I've got there. The lovely bits of red just throwing around the eyes like that really make a difference to the. I'm just going to put a bit more red into that one there, almost like a pure vermilion coming into that. You find the same in kind of Frans Hal's paintings. I think has been a big influence on Freud. It's Frans Hal in his painting, and just looking at that movement of the grey coming into that. Slightly darker eyelid, the line of the eyelid there. And a bit more of the eye. Oops. And make quite a lot of thick white paint just thrown in to get the idea of the reflected light. I'm going to use very light ochre to do that with a really clean brush. And I'm going to use quite a big brush to do it, just to flick in the paint so it doesn't look too contrived. When you use a very small brush, it can end up being too smart, too neat, and just trying to get the lightness of the pink. Still sort of struggling to get this colour in on the cheek there. I'm just trying to get that nice and clean. A bit more white with it. More of an orange. Then it moves out to more of an ochre just here. It drops down towards the face. And then the nose itself has got lots of pinks underneath that. And I'm going to go bring for the grey ochres. Putting a grey in there, just throw a grey in there just to set them off. Without the grey, the colours really don't work half as well. Just throwing bits of grey in the painting. And the top eyelid is much lighter. I've got the greys in that. And And then some really light ochres. Like I say, we're going for the nose. A little bit of, tiny bit of black, just to grey it slightly. And you get this greenish colour. So it could be a bit more yellow in it, because the yellow actually make it a bit more green. Now this is really thick paint throwing on to the really quite thick. Now I don't, to get this thickness of the paint like that, I think it might be mixing some little blobs of paint. There's something with the paint, I'm not quite sure what it is. I think, I know a lot of painters in the past used to mix ash with the paint, and it creates this kind of texture within the painting. Just take this colour away, just not happy with that colour. That's okay, that side, it was just this one. Just a little bit, got killing it a bit, so I've had to take it away and redo it. Again, mixing the red. Try mixing the ochre with the red, that might be the idea, that's better. It's more like it, and more white in that, just a little bit. And there's a little bit more of grey reds around the, or just here, just a few breaking up. Anyway, I think I've done enough there. I mean, obviously it's something that's, with Freud, he takes time, comes back, paint dries, and he keeps working at it. I mean, if you wanted to really build up and really learn about the layering of painting, sometimes acrylic's good to use just to practice things getting dry. So he'd be coming back and things be dry and keep layering over it. But the main thing is the colours he's using, and what I've tried to do is just show you the kind of mixing is doing, and how the colours blend, and how the warm and cool works. So I hope you enjoyed that, everybody. Well, what we're going to do next time, I'm going to look for another interpretation video. I'm going to be looking at Giorgio de Chirico, and what we're looking at is painting called The Song of Love, 1914, as early as that. So take a look at that, see what you think of it, see if you can make any sense of it. I mean, I've got my own ideas, but it'd be great if someone could come back to me with an idea of what they think the painting's about, because it's really mysterious painting. But I'll give you my interpretation of it. And the next mixing video we're going to be doing, we're going to look at Anders Zorn. And Anders Zorn's a really quite amazing painter, can use a really much smaller palette. It's just using the black and white, red, vermilion and yellow ochre. So we're looking at that, the next actually kind of mixing one. Anyway, thank you everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you again. Bye.